Financial wellness. Reach out to them for advice at 855-DON-GINO. And now back to your hosts, Don Getling and Gino Franti.
There's a higher percentage of affluent transactions happening right now than I've seen in the last 5 to 6 years for sure.
Yeah, there certainly is. And I'm seeing more that you don't have eyes on that are cash.
Okay.
Crazy numbers of cash, big numbers. Like I million plus cash.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Well, because the stock market's not performing well, so you might as well put your money into something that feels tangible, which people are buying real estate. So the reason I bring that up is because interest rates, and we can get into an argument about the haves and the have-nots, but interest rates for those purchasing homes under 625 or with loan amounts under 625 or loans amount under 417 are actually more expensive right now than loans for those that are purchasing in the 7s, 8s, 9s, and millions. So a typical loan that we would see for somebody purchasing a multi-million-dollar residence or anything over $1 million is they would take an adjustable rate mortgage rather than a fixed for 10 years, plenty of time, and it would be in the low 3s, Steve. Versus if you're buying a house that's $500,000, let's say, you're probably looking at something in the low 4s.
Right.
So you're talking about the wealthy receiving a 1% discount because they're willing to take a little more risk on the way they take their mortgage. It's a great time to buy real estate.
All the way across the board. Can we go back to TRID for a second and close that loop?
Yeah, let's go back.
So to the listener, the most significant part of this deal is how you get to see the numbers. Okay, so the way it used to be done, you'd apply for your loan, you'd get a good faith estimate that would disclose what the lender's perception of the fees that they'd be charging you and the fees on behalf of others would be charging you, and then you would get a look at that. And then you wouldn't see it until you were in my office with loan documents. 3 or 4 weeks later, okay?
Right, the gap.
That's right, yeah, the black hole.
Yeah.
And anyway, so now what's happening is there's a thing called a loan estimator, and that comes out in the very beginning of the transaction where you're getting, as a consumer, a first glance at numbers. And as Gino was mentioning offline, every change that goes on beyond that, anytime there's a change to the figures, the consumer is being disclosed in the spirit of transparency. The bottom line is we're behind the scenes like the Wizard of Oz, moving the numbers around on a statement called a closing disclosure that once the consumer is given that closing disclosure, there's a 3-day tick, okay, from the time that closing disclosure is made to the time that we can actually present you with loan documents. And that's if it's handed to you or emailed to you, verified. If it's mailed to you, it's a 7-day tick. So consequently, we're experiencing the control of the timing of the close where we hadn't had that before, which is kind of a good thing because it gives everybody time to breathe, do their job, get what they got to get done, and I see it as been a beneficial process. The bummer for us is behind the scenes when we are actually trying to educate that East Coast lender how to do business in the state of California, forgetting the TRID regulations. They speak a different language. They transact their escrows differently. In fact, back in the East Coast, people like me are actual attorneys.
Right.
So consequently, the whole process is different. And but anyway, getting back to our local situation, local lenders here, Skyline at the top of the heap, has a finger on exactly what needs to be done and how it needs to be done. There's no issues there. But when you get somebody who's not used to doing these kind of transactions, it's a dicey situation.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, we're not exempt from having some of these situations as well, Steve. We do work with companies. We have to work with all the escrow companies, and we don't pick the escrow companies. So we do sometimes encounter where we find mistakes. And so the way that process looks is I send out a CD. They send me an estimate. I put what's on the estimate back into my system, and I say, oh, wait, something's wrong, but the consumer just got notified of a number. And then when I said something's wrong and I go back to them, they say, oh, you're right. Let me fix that. And then they send it back to me. Then I fix it in my system. Consumer gets notified again.
Right.
And so, it's not uncommon that the consumer receives now, rather than one time in the beginning and one time that's accurate at the close, they now receive 3 or 4 updates that are unnecessary.
Right.
That are just because there was an element of human error somewhere in between, and they are notified now. So it does cause a lot of confusion. And you see that cash to close number move around quite a bit.
And also, we're spending a lot of time on the phone trying to educate a lender how to reflect the actual fees of others on the right section of the closing disclosure. Because ultimately, if I sign off on that closing disclosure and the fees are not correct on behalf of others, I become financially responsible for that fee.
Oh, run that by me one more time.
If the CD closing disclosure does not properly and accurately reflect the fees of others, title insurance, escrow, homeowners insurance, notary, messenger, that kind of stuff, if it's not correct identified on the CD and I sign off on it as if it is, I just bought those numbers.
Well, that happens a lot to us as well as lenders. If we were to take your numbers for granted and not verify that they're accurate, we're on the hook for those as well. So it does create an element of responsibility.
Well, it's to the consumer's benefit. We're force balancing to the CD before the documents are being released, which means a couple quick things. One, the numbers are accurate. Two, when the loan documents are published and are signed, there's no after-fact messing around with conditions of this and go getting that and updating this. You're ready to close. So docs get signed on a Thursday, we fund on a Friday, close on a Monday, or docs get signed on Wednesday, close fund Thursday, close Friday. So it's actually worked out pretty well.
So it's a beautiful element of transparency. We'll get uniformity as an industry. It'll probably take a whole year before the industry gets completely uniform. So let's just say we've got 8 to 10 months left of learning curve for the rest of the industry, and ultimately, though, the consumer does pay a price for it, and I want to make that clear. Is transactions used to be 30-day transactions, and now it's more prudent to do a 40-day transaction. I know a lot of guys out there are saying you need 45. You don't really need 45. 40 is fair. But if I used to take on a transaction today and I used to lock that interest rate for 30 days, that's real different than if I'm locking the interest rate for 40 or 45. There's a cost to that. Now, it's not a lot. It's an eighth or a quarter of a % of the total loan amount volume. But across the nation, that's
big money.
Millions and millions, in fact, billions of dollars in costs that are being passed on to the consumer because of a legislative change. I just wanted to point that out. All in the interest of transparency, all in good spirit, but it still does result in a cost to the consumer.
I think in the end, it's still a great time to buy, great time to sell. It's a great time to get in the real estate market and embrace the change.
Yeah, and we're embracing the change here at Skyline Home Loans. Steve, I know at your office you've embraced the change.
Certainly have.
We're still passionate about what we do. We talked a little bit earlier with Paul Dinkle of Remax of Valencia about investments. I still believe it's a great time to invest in real estate. Oh, my God. It still feels, if you want to know where we are in the curve and how it feels compared to the last time we had a real estate boom, it feels like 2002. It doesn't feel like 2007.
It's an exciting time, that's for sure. But, the world markets right now are a little volatile. Not little, they're very volatile. So I think holding your investment money close to your chest, looking for a great piece of real estate to invest in, and having some great investors, specialists like Gino and like Paul and like ourselves at Newhall Escrow is the best possible way to increase the odds in your favor of being successful.
Well, words of wisdom from Steve Corn of Newhall Escrow, president, owner of Newhall Escrow. Always a great resource for you. And, another thing about Steve Corn is if you just need advice, general advice, almost like a psychotherapist, you could call him for pretty much whatever you need. So, Steve, what's a good way to get a hold of you?
You can reach us at 661-259-3450, or the email address is stevecorn, and that's C-O-R-N like the vegetable, at newhallescrow.com. And our website, newhallescrow.com, is a great resource to check out a myriad of forms that are available to the public, definitions of terms. So if you want to look up something you don't quite understand a word or two, go check that out. It's a great place to look.
Awesome, Steve. Well, thank you for joining me today and co-hosting in lieu of Don Getling, who couldn't make it. I really appreciate your time today. Thank you for joining us once again every Saturday morning at 9 a.m. on AM 1220 KHCS. And check out our website at donandgino.com.